All right, guys, so here's what we're up against. A lot of this stuff has hit me within the past day or so. Joe Biden's biggest weakness has become his greatest strength. Let me explain what that means. Early on, I told you guys that Joe Biden has what I like to call default support. Now, what I mean by that is he had the highest name recognition of anybody running. He's the former vice president of the United States. He's Obama's VP. Obama has about a 60% approval rating, and in some polls even higher. So when people see that name and they're asked who they support for president, and they're relatively apolitical, but they're Democrats, Joe Biden is the default setting. Joe Biden is like, who's running? Oh, Joe? Oh, yeah, sure. I support Joe. That's good. And my perception of that was it can likely be a political liability. Why? Well, because Joe Biden isn't doing too well right now. He's totally incoherent. If I'm being totally honest with you guys, I think it's crystal clear that he has dementia. And on top of that, his record is not that great. His record is pretty similar to Hillary Clinton's, and it's a neoliberal corporate nightmare. So I thought the more Joe Biden talked, the more he would go down in the polls. Now, it wasn't only me who thought that. Also, his staffers thought that. And so they did what's called a limited visibility campaign or limited visibility strategy, which is just a fancy way of saying, hey man, keep this dude out of the spotlight because if he's in the spotlight, he's going to lose. The more people hear him talk, the more his numbers will go down. Now, this is actually what happened. Joe Biden famously did not campaign in almost any of the Super Tuesday states. He had one campaign office in California to over 20 for Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie won California, so perhaps that's not the best example. But Arkansas is another example. Biden didn't campaign there at all, and he ended up beating Bernie there. So they understand his weaknesses, and they're keeping him out of the spotlight as much as possible. So my understanding was I didn't think his campaign would be that savvy to keep him. And they're also denying interviews. They're doing as few interviews as humanly possible. I didn't think his campaign would be that savvy, but they have been savvy. And they've kept him away from the cameras. And as a result of that, his biggest weakness being the default option, where I thought over time all of his support is just going to go elsewhere. Well, at the last minute, with Mayor Pete dropping out, Amy Klobuchar dropping out, and endorsing him, and Beto joining as well, which was an attempt to help him in Texas, his biggest weakness became his greatest strength. Because now, instead of that vote being dispersed between all those candidates, instead of that vote, some of it going to Mayor Pete, some of it going to Amy Klobuchar, some of it going to Michael Bloomberg, some of it going to, fill in the blank with any other centrist candidates that were running, the corrupt establishment candidates that were running. Instead of that, it all coalesced around Biden. And I'm not kidding when I say I think that at least 20% of the people who voted for him on Super Tuesday haven't heard him speak at length in the past year or two or three. I think it was just, oh, that guy? It's going to be that guy? Okay, I guess we'll go vote for that guy. Now, the other thing is, the media has been relentless, nonstop, basically saying Joe Biden is the safe option, Joe Biden is the electable option, Joe Biden is the go-to candidate, and there's this underlying implication that for anybody who's serious about beating Trump, you go with Joe Biden. Bernie is like the pie-in-the-sky ideologue, and that's not, even if you agree with him on the issues, he's not the one that's going to beat Trump. And they've been hammering that home every day, nonstop. And, I really do think that impacted the culture of normie Democrats, where the older voters, their top priority is we have to beat Trump. And they've been told erroneously, because it's rank propaganda, but they've been told repeatedly and erroneously that Biden's the way to do that, or, a so-called moderate Democrat is the way to do that. And so they ended up going down that path. Now, the dynamic that is frustrating me to no end is that I see it and you see it. Bernie Sanders has been campaigning all around this country. He built a grassroots army. Anytime he has a rally, he's got thousands and thousands of supporters screaming their heads off and loving it. And he's got all this enthusiasm. Joe Biden can't fill a gymnasium. So the thing that really takes the wind out of our sails and the dynamic that is really just making me go nuts is that when you're the default option, as Biden was, he didn't have to do anything. The onus was all on Bernie to make the case and say, no, here's why I'm the better candidate. Because the default setting was, I'm just going to go for Joe Biden. And so that dynamic is bad enough, but it's the extent to which that dynamic is real that's driving me nuts. Biden has to do nothing right now, and he has 55% support nationally in a head-to-head with Bernie. Bernie has 45% support. Biden has done Dickie McGee's acts, and he's got that cushion. And the best analogy I can make is, this is a race, and Joe Biden is told, all right, man, you got to run a 50-yard dash. And then they tell Bernie, all right, man, you got to run a marathon. And you look at that and you go, well, that doesn't make sense, and that's not fair. So, but that's the dynamic. That's the way the race is working. And the bar is so low for Biden because he's got that default support. He's got the media, which is actively not hostile to him, but they are very hostile to Bernie Sanders. And that's where we are right now. So you might be thinking, okay, but how can we overcome that? Because all the late voters broke for Biden. The older demographic is so strongly pro-Biden. And this was the revenge of the normie Democrat. So how do we flip this thing? How do we change the dynamic? How do we win moving forward? And, I think one of the most important things Bernie can do is go back to something he was doing earlier, which was working at the time, which is he has to relentlessly make the case that if you're a normie Democrat and you want to be Trump and that's the thing you have at, the top priority, you actually have it exactly backwards. And Joe Biden will lose to Trump and Bernie Sanders, will beat Trump. And the way you make that case, there's 1,000 ways you can make that case, but one of the best ones is probably if Bernie went out there and said and spelled it out very clearly for people. Hillary Clinton was the so-called safe option in 2016, and she lost to Trump. Joe Biden is the so-called safe option in 2020, and he will lose to Trump as well. I'm the only one who could beat Donald Trump. You're running somebody who supported the outsourcing deals, who supported the Iraq war. Donald Trump beat up on Hillary Clinton on those issues, and he won. Joe Biden is a weak candidate. Joe Biden cannot beat Trump. I can beat Trump. So you have to repeat it. Say this is Hillary Clinton 2.0. Say we all remember what it felt like in 2016 on that night when Hillary Clinton lost. So if your main concern really is beating Trump, I'm the electability candidate. I am. And then again, the other part of that, and he has to hammer that home in 1,000 ways, but the other part of that is Bernie saying, I'm an FDR Democrat. I'm a New Deal Democrat. I'm the most democratic Democrat. That's me. And ultimately what I am is a moderate. Joe Biden's the extremist. Ultimately, I'm the centrist because I'm right smack dab in the center of the American people's policy views. I represent that. So he's the extremist with his voting record and what he's done. And he's the unsafe choice. He's the risky choice. I'm the safe choice. And he has to hammer home that dynamic. And I will say at the same time, specifically in the Rust Belt states, do what he is doing, which is nonstop ads on trade. Trade all day long. In Michigan, he's running an ad. Joe Biden supported NAFTA. Joe Biden supported permanent normal trade relations with China. There's no way he's going to beat Trump with that. He destroyed the region because all the jobs were outsourced. Hit him on that over and over. In Florida, they have the Obama ad. That's good, but I want to see that Social Security ad specifically in Florida. Nonstop, Joe Biden, the video of him saying, I want to cut Social Security and Medicare. Say that because a lot of the voters in Florida are older. Let them know, okay, you want Biden? Fine, but this is what you're signing up for. He's going to cut your benefits. That's what he's going to do. So micro-target on the specific issues that are important in the given states. That's one thing you do. And then the other thing you do is, again, make the electability argument and tie Joe Biden directly into Hillary Clinton. Bring up John Kerry, for example. That's another example. And you talk about, I'm FDR. I'm the New Deal Democrat. FDR won 4 times. The only way we beat a fake populist like Donald Trump is with a real populist like me. That's what I think he has to do. But the dynamic that's driving me crazy is that cable news and the media, they're a lot more influential than any of us thought. And in the last day before Super Tuesday, when they all coalesced around Biden, we saw just how influential they are. That nonstop positive media coverage post South Carolina, that, how much they were talking about the endorsements. They're so big. This is great. Isn't Joe Biden the most electable? Isn't this amazing? Isn't he now the front runner? All that shifted the race because so many voters came out at the last minute, decided who to vote for. They broke Biden in massive numbers. They were older voters. So now it's time to do everything we can in our power to flip those arguments. And also, I think that the media and the establishment are going to try another pro-Biden trick at the last minute. I think that's going to happen because it worked so well on Super Tuesday that this next Tuesday, it'll either be Sunday or Monday that they roll out some big pro-Biden news, whatever it might be, a new endorsement, I don't know, but something. And so I hope Bernie Sanders' campaign is ready for that and they have their own thing that they can counter with. And I would literally keep it in the holster until they break their news. Like I said, they brought out Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar and had them endorse Biden. Okay, well, I would be doing everything behind the scenes to get Tom Steyer Sawyer, to get Andrew Yang, to get Tulsi, and I would, honestly, even though we're really mad at her, I would work so hard and basically tell Elizabeth Warren, what do you want? Whatever you want. You want Secretary of Treasury? Fine, Secretary of Treasury, to get her endorsement. So if whatever they do, you want to have something where you can say, nice, I raise. Here's what I got. Because last time they were caught flat on their feet because I think the Sanders campaign thought in the same way, that the Trump campaign thought, like, oh, the establishment is going to be splintered because they all have big egos. So I thought, Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar, maybe Klobuchar to a lesser degree, but definitely Mayor Pete, his ego is going to keep him in the race for Super Tuesday, for sure. And, it turned out that, no, the establishment coalesced behind Biden at the last minute, and it worked. So they're a lot more organized than the Republican establishment is. By the way, there were reports that Mayor Pete was defiant at first. He didn't want to drop out. But then he got the call from Obama. And I don't know what was offered. Definitely a position in Biden's administration. But Obama got him to say yes. And I'm not surprised by that because Obama's his, that's his guiding star. He loves Obama. He's literally trying to copy him on a daily basis, Mayor Pete is. But at first, there were reports. Somebody in Mayor Pete's campaign posted on Facebook and then deleted it. They were like, at first, Pete was defiant. So if only Mayor Pete's ego was a little bit bigger and he stayed defiant, this race would look very different today. If they never coalesced behind Biden, it's over. Bernie would have ran away with it. The question would have been, like we were talking about not too long ago, is it going to be a Bernie majority or a plurality? But since they're organized, that ended up working massively in their favor and against Bernie. So now we're in a whole new race, man. We got to be prepared. We got to be savvy. And, we got to fight. We got to make sure we win this thing because there's over an 80% chance that Joe Biden loses to Trump. And Joe Biden, I'm not kidding when I say this, he definitely has dementia. And the fact that the Democratic establishment is overlooking that tells me something very simple. They would rather have 4 more years of Donald Trump than 4 years of Bernie Sanders.